There's one mistake countless grandparents make every day, and most have no idea they're doing it. It seems harmless, it even feels loving, but over time it can push grandchildren away and weaken the very relationship grandparents are trying so hard to protect. Let's talk about it. Here's a scene that plays out in millions of homes every single week. Grandma is watching the grandkids for the afternoon. There's a rule in the house: no candy before dinner. The parents set it, they've been consistent about it, and the kids know it. But the moment the parents walk out the door, Grandma opens the cabinet, pulls out the good stuff, and looks at little Emma with a wink. "Don't tell your mom and dad," Emma giggles. Grandma feels like the cool one. Everybody's happy, except they're not. Not really. Parenting expert Esther Wojcicki says grandparents should never encourage their grandchildren to keep secrets from their parents, no matter how harmless the secret seems. Whether it's a delayed bedtime or an extra helping of cookies, encouraging kids to keep secrets from their parents can create long-term damage. That wink across the kitchen, it feels like love, and it is, in a way. But it's also the first domino. Children see their grandparents as authority figures, so those secrets can actually teach kids that dishonesty is acceptable, and at the same time, they undermine the trust between a child and their parents. According to child and adolescent psychiatrist Judith Joseph, think about what that means for a second. Grandparents carry enormous weight in a child's world. They're not just fun adults, they're figures of wisdom, of history, of family identity. So when a grandparent models secrecy, the child doesn't file it away as a grandma quirk. They absorb it as a lesson about how the world works. And the candy, that's just the entry point, because grandparents often bend the rules when watching their grandkids, offering forbidden foods, extending screen time, or buying unapproved toys. Each one of those moments, on its own, feels trivial. Add them up over months and years, and something bigger starts to form. Family therapist Christopher Hansen says circumventing the authority and wishes of the parents is another area where grandparents get into trouble. And the ripple goes further than the obvious friction between grandparent and parent. As therapist Robin K. Stillwell puts it, if adult children feel that their parenting rules or schedules are ignored or undermined, it can bleed into other aspects of the relationship, including their trust. That word trust is the whole story, because once trust breaks down between a grandparent and the parents of the grandchildren, the grandparent doesn't just lose ground with the mom and dad, they start to lose access to the grandkids entirely. As Moore explains, when you undermine the parents, you're actually damaging your relationship with your grandchildren, because those grandchildren see everything. They see how you treat their mom. That's the paradox sitting at the heart of this whole thing. The grandparent who sneaks candy, bends rules, and keeps little secrets almost always does it because they want a closer bond with the grandkids. They want to be the fun one, the safe one, the one kids run to. And so they hand out extra screen time and whisper, "Don't tell mom." They think they're building something. What they're actually doing, slowly, invisibly, is tearing it down. The consequences of grandparents undermining parents can be significant and may include tension and conflict within the family, confusion and anxiety for children, and a breakdown in trust and communication between parents and grandparents. And here's what no one talks about. 32% of parents limit the amount of time children see grandparents who agreed to but did not change their behavior, and 42% limit the amount of time children see grandparents who refuse to change. Nearly half of all grandparents who push back on parental rules end up seeing their grandchildren less because of it. Less time at holidays, fewer weekend visits, phone calls that don't get answered, not because anyone sat down and announced a punishment, but because the distance grows so quietly that by the time anyone names it, it's already a wall. So this is what we're going to dig into. Exactly how this one mistake spreads across a family like a crack in a foundation. Through 5 different ways grandparents unknowingly set it in motion every single day. To understand why grandparents make this mistake so consistently, you have to understand where it comes from. Because it doesn't come from selfishness, it comes from something much more complicated than that. The role of grandparent is one that's treasured and eagerly awaited by many. In our society, grandparents are expected to be gentle and soft-hearted, with a generous dose of spoiling as well. That expectation isn't random. It's cultural, It's generational, and it's deeply personal. Most grandparents raise their own children through years of exhausting discipline. The early mornings, the homework fights, the no you can't, and because I said so moments. Many grandparents relish the role of being able to do all the fun stuff and then send them home. And honestly, that feeling makes sense. They put in the hard yards the first time around. Now it's supposed to be the reward phase. Pure joy. No rules, no consequences. Just love and ice cream and memories. The problem is that reward phase mindset is exactly what drives the mistake. Clinical psychologist Dr. Sophie Moaggi says, in many cases, grandparents try to impose their parenting strategies merely because they consider themselves more experienced. They think they know what is better for the child. Therefore, it is their right to guide the parents. That's a crucial distinction to sit with. Most grandparents who undermine parents don't experience it as undermining. They experience it as helping, as correcting an overcorrection, as bringing a more seasoned perspective to a new parent who's clearly being too rigid. And let's be honest, sometimes they might even be right. Grandparents often have a different approach to parenting that may be contrary to how their kids are raising the grandkids. And it may also be different from how they parented their now-grown children. Parenting trends shift every generation. What was considered perfectly normal in 1985 might look completely different from what experts recommend today. And grandparents who raised healthy, well-adjusted kids, your mom, your dad, have every reason to trust their own instincts. That confidence is earned. But here's where the trap springs. Some grandparents don't consider the rule important or believe it's their right to ignore certain rules because they have authority over their own adult child, or believe they're more experienced caretakers who are better able to determine what's best for the grandchild. That last part is the most dangerous version of this thinking, because the moment a grandparent starts operating from a position of, I know better than you do about your own child, they've stepped from support into competition, and parents feel that. They feel it immediately. There are a number of ways that being a grandparent can cause stress and amplify tension with adult children. But what research consistently shows is that the stress doesn't usually start with a big dramatic blow-up. It starts exactly here, with small, daily, completely normalized acts of rule-bending. The kind neither party even flags as a problem at first. There's also something happening on the grandchild's side of this equation that most people don't think about until it's already a problem. A child splitting behavior, creating a division between their mother and grandparents to get their way, must be interrupted at an early age. If not, the child may develop more manipulative and antisocial behaviors as they grow, and the relationship with their parent will become strained. Kids are smart. They learn very quickly which adult is the yes and which adult is the no, and once they learn that grandma is the one who says yes, they start playing both sides. Not out of malice, they're kids, but they file it away. Grandma bends. Mom doesn't. So when I want something, I go to grandma. That dynamic, left unchecked, doesn't just breed manipulation in the child. It slowly, steadily erodes the grandparent's own credibility as an authority figure. The grandkid who thinks of grandma as the candy lady isn't the same kid who goes to grandma with something real, something that matters, something painful. And that's the relationship the grandparent was actually trying to build. Child-parent trust is essential for kids' emotional development. When kids feel secure and confident that they can share anything with their parents, they're more likely to grow up to be happy and self-reliant adults. Research shows the same principle holds for the grandparent relationship. Deep bonds with grandchildren aren't built on candy and screen time. They're built on something the fun grandparent trap actually starves: consistency, honesty, and respect. Now let's look at how this plays out in 3 of the most specific, daily life situations grandparents step into without realizing the damage they're doing: gift giving, food, and household rules. Start with gifts, because this one is everywhere. Gift giving is a loving gesture, but without consulting the child's parents, it can lead to tension and misunderstandings. Christopher Hansen warns that extravagant or inappropriate gifts can frustrate parents and make them feel undermined. And here's how it usually goes. Grandpa shows up with something big, something the parents specifically said no to, or something that blows whatever the parents were planning to give completely out of the water. The kid loses their mind with excitement, and Grandpa feels wonderful. He got that reaction. He's the hero of the afternoon. But in the car ride home, the parents are quietly furious. Not because they're ungrateful, because they spent months telling their child that the expensive toy wasn't in the budget, or wasn't age-appropriate, or didn't line up with the values they're trying to teach. And in 30 seconds, Grandpa undid all of it. Giving cash, gifts, or investments can be complicated, especially without thinking about the broader family dynamics. As certified financial planner George Raftopoulos puts it, sometimes outright gifts, although they feel good, can have a lot of financial ramifications to all parties involved. The same goes for financial support, covering school tuition, childcare, or living expenses without clear boundaries and intentions. Marriage and family therapist Robin K. Stilwell advises, clarify if a gift comes with conditions, or if the recipient has full freedom to use it. Money as gift is its own category of complexity, because when a grandparent hands a significant amount of money to a grandchild, without any conversation with the parents, they're not just bypassing the parent's authority. They're potentially reshaping the child's relationship with money itself, setting expectations the parents now have to manage. Then there's food, and this one might be the most common daily battleground of all. Grandparents in studies acknowledged that they used unhealthy food to help control their grandchildren's behavior, to reward them for achievements, and to create a stronger bond with them. Read that again. They used food to control behavior, to reward, and to bond. Those are three very specific emotional strategies, being executed through what looks like just handing out a cookie. The grandkid learns fast. Behave at grandma's, get a treat. Finish something difficult. Get a treat. Just exist near grandma. Get a treat. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any individual treat. The problem is the pattern it builds. While the preparation of meals from scratch, with fresh ingredients, could be seen as a positive, this was undermined by the role grandparents could play in overfeeding children, or feeding less healthy foods. The parents go home and try to enforce a balanced plate, and the kid pushes back, because at grandma's eating well came with a cookie chaser. The lesson has already been taught. Now the parents are reteaching it, and the child doesn't understand why the rules keep changing, depending on which house they're in. And then there are the household rules, bedtime, screen time, how kids are spoken to, how they address adults. While well-intentioned, bending the rules by offering forbidden foods, extending screen time, or buying unapproved toys can make parents feel disrespected and excluded. These are the kinds of things that get dismissed as harmless. It's just one late night. It's just a little extra TV. I'm not hurting anyone. But parenting is not built on one-off exceptions. Parenting is built on consistency. And every time a grandparent punches a hole in that consistency, they're not just making the parent's job harder. They're signaling to the child, in real time, that the rules have loopholes. And the loophole is grandma. Stilwell explains that if adult children feel their parenting rules or schedules are ignored, it can bleed into other aspects of the relationship, including their trust. Trust. There's that word again. And once that trust goes, once a parent has mentally cataloged enough moments of feeling dismissed, of having their choices overridden, of hearing "don't tell your mom and dad," the relationship starts to shift. Not in a conversation, not in a confrontation, just in a quiet, gradual pulling back that the grandparent often doesn't even notice until it's happened. So far, we've talked mostly about what this does to the relationship between grandparents and parents. But let's go deeper than the adult drama for a moment, because the person absorbing all of this most completely is the child. Children who grow up being overindulged grow up believing they are the center of the universe. They develop disrespectful attitudes. They become helpless as a result of not knowing the skills they need to function as adults. They grow up with an overblown sense of entitlement. They become irresponsible, feel ungrateful, and unhappy. That's not an opinion. That's what researchers who've spent years studying overindulgence have found. And it's a stunning list to attach to something that starts as a grandparent wanting to give love. Researcher David Bredehoft conducted 10 studies on overindulgence, measuring the correlation between being overindulged as a child and adults' attitudes about delayed gratification, entitlement, and gratitude. And the key finding? Adults who were overindulged as children resent it. Overindulgence produces an overblown sense of entitlement, which is evident to those who interact with college graduates seeking jobs. Bredehoft noted, "Think about that arc. A grandparent says yes when the parents say no. The child gets the toy, the sugar, the screen time, the late night. The child registers at a bone-deep level. Persistence gets rewards. Rules are flexible. The answer no just means ask someone else. And 20 years later, that same person sits in a job interview with an air of expectation. They can't explain. And employers notice it. Now, to be fair, grandparents are not solely responsible for a child's entire developmental outcome. Parents play the central role. Schools matter. Friendships matter. But grandparents are often the first place a child learns that the world outside their immediate home operates differently. And if the lesson they learn is that there are no consistent rules, that love equals giving in, that authority is something you can work around, that lesson travels. Normalizing keeping secrets can also confuse kids, potentially making it more likely they won't open up to their parents on serious issues, like if another adult abuses them and tells them to stay silent. That's an extreme consequence, but a real one. When a child is routinely told, "Don't tell your parents about small things," they build a template. Secrets are normal. Keeping things from mom and dad is fine. It's just what you do. And if something genuinely dangerous happens, and someone tells them to stay quiet, they've already been conditioned to accept that instruction. Related research has shown that grandparents' doting behaviors were associated with externalizing behavioral problems in their grandchildren. Externalizing behavior means acting out, aggression, defiance, conduct issues. The doting isn't causing those problems in isolation, but the pattern of boundary erosion that doting creates doesn't disappear when the grandparent leaves. The child brings it back into the house. And then there's the emotional confusion of being a child caught between two authority systems. It isn't fair to put children in a position where they're caught in the middle of a conflict between a grandparent and their own adult child. But that's exactly what happens when grandparents operate by a different set of rules. The child isn't just navigating two households. They're navigating two incompatible value systems, and nobody's told them how. Speaking poorly about a parent can confuse the child and harm family trust. Children pick up on subtle hostility, says Hansen, and it affects their emotional well-being. The child who hears grandpa sigh dismissively when mom's rules come up. That child doesn't think grandpa has a point. That child feels pulled in half. And kids who feel pulled in half between the people they love most don't thrive. They manage. And managing isn't the same as growing. Here's where the story turns. Because most of this is fixable. And that's not a small thing. Because the alternative, the place this goes when it isn't fixed, is genuinely devastating. As increasing numbers of adults choose to estrange themselves from their parents, the number of alienated grandparents can only increase. Fulfilling the grandparent role through a warm and loving relationship with a grandchild is a deeply treasured goal. That estrangement can block indefinitely. There is a special term for the loss that is experienced, ambiguous loss. It refers to a non-death loss that reflects the physical absence of a person while that person is still alive. Anticipated relationships and experiences are denied, and this leads to compromised well-being. Ambiguous loss. That's the clinical term for what grandparents experience when they lose access to their grandchildren. Not death. Something in some ways harder to carry because the person is still out there. The child is still growing up. Birthdays are still happening. Bro, bro, fr, 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 First friends, first heartbreaks, all of it going on, just without you in it. 42% of parents limit the amount of time children see grandparents, who refuse to change their behavior. That's almost half. And those aren't bad grandparents. Many of them are genuinely loving people who just never connected what they were doing to what they were losing. So what does the road back look like? When you support the parents, you support your relationship with your grandchildren. It's that simple. That's the whole answer distilled. But let's talk about what it actually looks like in practice, because support the parents can sound abstract when you're sitting across from your adult child. Feeling like your experience is being dismissed, instead of pushing for change, grandparents should take time to listen. Understand the parenting principles their children follow, and find ways to support them within that framework. That requires something that doesn't come naturally. To someone with decades of lived experience, setting aside the authority of having been there before and meeting the current parents where they are. Not performing agreement, actually choosing to operate inside someone else's framework, even when you have opinions about it. If you want to be part of your grandchildren's lives, it will need to be on terms that both you and their parents agree to. As Hansen says, talking with one another is always the best way to gain an understanding of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. That conversation, the one nobody wants to have because it feels like being put in timeout by your own kid, is actually the most powerful thing a grandparent can do for their future access to those grandchildren. Because parents who feel heard and respected don't build walls. They open doors. It can be awkward scolding your own parents. That's why new parents should set grandparenting ground rules as soon as possible to avoid nasty arguments and frayed relationships down the road. And this is a responsibility on both sides. The earlier the conversation happens, the less anyone has to unpack. The longer a family waits, the more incidents pile up, the more resentments calcify. The harder it becomes to just have a conversation instead of a confrontation. The stronger your relationship with your adult child, the less likely you are to run into conflicts over care of your grandchildren. That's the foundation everything else sits on. Not strategies or scripts or workarounds, just the actual health of the relationship between the grandparent and their adult child. As Stilwell says, if a grandparent acts as a caregiver without clear parameters or expectations, resentment can develop. So set the parameters. Say them out loud. Here's what I'll do when I'm watching the kids. Here's what I won't do. Tell me what matters most to you and I'll hold it. That conversation is awkward for 30 minutes. The silence of estrangement lasts years. And for grandparents already in that silence, already feeling the distance, already noticing, the visits getting shorter and the calls less frequent, the work is harder but not impossible. It is important to validate grandparents' important role in their grandchildren's lives, while at the same time encouraging them to take the high road. In regard to maintaining good relations with adult children and children-in-law as gatekeepers of grandparent-grandchild relationships. Gatekeepers. That's the word that matters here. Parents are, legally and practically, the gatekeepers. No grandparent wins a war against the gatekeeper. But grandparents who stop fighting and start supporting, for reconciliation to occur and eventual reunion with grandchildren, the gatekeeper needs to be taught that they don't need to fear you. That's the posture. Not capitulation, not pretending you have no opinions. Just removing the threat, becoming someone the parents feel safe around. Someone who holds the rules, who doesn't create drama, who doesn't quietly reparent the kids the moment the door closes. Because here's what's true, and what all the research and all the therapists and all the family stories keep coming back to: when you support the parents, you support your relationship with your grandchildren. The grandparent who gets it right doesn't show up with the biggest gift. They don't sneak the most candy. They don't stay latest or bend the most rules. They show up as a consistent, trustworthy presence that the parents don't have to worry about. And because of that, the parents stop counting visits. The calls get longer. The kids start running to them for real things, not because of what they're given, but because of who those grandparents chose to be. That's the bond every grandparent is actually after, and the path to it doesn't go through a secret wink across the kitchen. It goes through an honest conversation. No one wants to